When I was 10 years old, a Bais Yaacov opened in our town. It started with one afternoon class for 2 hours for all ages in one class. For me and my friends, it was a dream come true. Besides the afternoon program, we got together on Friday nights after the Suda, on Shabbos morning for davening, and on Shabbos afternoon for benos. We sang songs, danced away, and danced away. It was heaven for us. On one occasion, Sarah Shanira came to visit our school. I'm very thankful that I saw her. I remember how we all admired her. When she spoke to us, we were inspired by her warmth that she radiated. However, 2 years later, on September the 1st, 1939, World War II started. German troops invaded Poland and soon defeated the Polish army. The happy life that we had known came to an end. At first, the Germans were taking people from the street to working camps. Because of this, my parents or my brothers did not dare leave the house. Being the youngest, I went out to stand in line to buy some bread and all the necessities for the family. Soon, we were forced to relocate to another town. We left our home and possessions behind and moved in with another family in the nearby city called Sosnowice. One morning, around 5 a.m., there was a loud banging with rifles on the door. The Germans had records of all girls my age and had come to take me from my family. I saw the terror in my parents' and siblings' eyes. No pleading or begging helped. I was taken to an old building in town together with many girls of about the same age. Where we waited for 2 days without any food. We were then transported by train to a labor camp in Parshnys, a small village in Sudetenland, which was in Czechoslovakia, near the German border. The train journey was very long. It took 2 days to get there, without any food or even a drink of water. The camp was located in a quiet and isolated place surrounded by mountains called the Riesengebirge. There were 2,000 women in the camp and 2 barracks. Each barrack held 1,000 women. As soon as I arrived at the camp, a girl that I knew from Bais Yaacov came running to me to meet me. She had already been there for a month. She led me to an empty bunk bed near her own and helped me to become familiar with the new circumstances. The girl remained a close friend throughout my stay in the camp. In the next few weeks, new transport of girls of all types arrived at the camp. Before long, a close group of 10 from Bais Yaacov girls from different towns was formed. These girls became my close friends during the entire time in the work camp. Life was really unbearable in the camp. We were hungry all the time. It is a miracle that we survived for so long on so little food. Once a week we were given a half of a small loaf of bread. This meant we had a half a slice of bread for the day, plus the watery soup which we were given twice daily. Every morning we were awakened at 4 a.m. There were 1,000 girls in one large room with only 3 toilets. The water with which we were washing ourselves was either extremely cold or extremely hot. At 5 a.m. we lined up outside for roll call, in the rain, snow, or freezing cold. During this lineup, each morning, the Germans would try to scare us and demoralize us by shouting insults and threats to our lives. We then lined up in rows of 4 and marched for an hour and a half to the work factory, which was called the Spinnerei. We did not have proper shoes or clothing for the cold weather. We were always accompanied by the German Gestapo on each side with rifles, ready to beat up anyone who stepped out of line. Work began at 7 a.m. for 12 hours straight until 7 p.m. The work was very hard. We couldn't take a break even for a minute. People were beaten up for any little mistake. The job was very skilled and demanding. I had to run the spinning machines and fix the threads whenever they tore while the machine was still in motion. This was a job that normally would have required weeks of training. We had to learn it very quickly. At the end of the day, exhausted and hungry, we walked back to the camp. At the camp, we lined up for a little watery soup with a few floating potato peels in it. At this time, disciplining would take place. The German guards created a constant atmosphere of terror. They were always beating up girls and shouting vicious curses. Every day it seemed as if there was something new and terrible happening to scare us and punish us in their attempt to make us feel low and dehumanized, depriving us of all the dignity we once had. The German SS would often come to check our physical conditions. If anybody appeared too weak to work, they were taken away. I was very fortunate to have this group of fine, frum girls as my dear friends. We constantly tried to cheer each other up when the German guards left at night. We talked about our families. We sang songs. We tried to keep as many mitzvahs as possible. We davened on Shabbos. We sang Zemiras. We washed and benched on our small piece of bread. We tried to keep ourselves as clean as possible, and we tried to treat ourselves and others with kindness, respect, and good manners. There was a German woman at the head of the camp. She was called a Lagerführer. Before the war, she had been a psychiatrist. She was a very vicious woman who was feared and hated by everyone. She would go around the camp shouting insults and beating girls up. Yet the same woman observed the special behavior of our group and somehow showed compassion and even respect toward us. When she approached our table, she would stop and talk to us and ask questions about our religion. On Bais, she gave us each a potato because she knew that we wouldn't eat that small piece of bread that we were given. She even had a name for our group. She called us the Kultusgemeinde, which means cultural society. Our group of Fri Jul Yaacov girls had an impact and influence on the other girls in the camp. Many girls despaired and lost their will to go on. Our group was a model of hope and goodwill. I'll tell you a story that happened many years later here in Toronto. One day, my daughter and I were visiting someone in Baycrest. As we were standing at the elevator, a woman rushed over to me and hugged me and kissed me. "You were in the Kultusgemeinde. I'm so happy to see you." It was remarkable that after 60 years she still remembered this. On one occasion, the Lagerfeuer saved my life. One day I had a bad cough and fever and was tempted to stay in the barrack instead of going to work. It had been 2 years of working very hard every day. I dreamt of taking it easy for just one day. I went to the infirmary, and the Lagerfeuer happened to be there. I told her that I was not feeling well. I thought she would be compassionate and say I could stay back from work. But all of a sudden she got angry with me. She started to scream at me, "Get out of here, and fast." She was furious. I thought this was the end of her nice treatment of me. I was very scared. The next day, I found out that the SS had come that day and had taken all the sick people in the infirmary away. She must have known that they were coming. My camp was liberated by Russian army on May the 8th, 1945. The only other survivor in my family was my brother, Moishe Buxbaum. He had been in a nearby camp for men. When the Russians came to liberate our camp, he was sitting on the top of a Russian tank. He was the first Jewish man to be seen by the women in our camp for years. They all surrounded him and asked him if he knew the whereabouts of their family members. While I mention my brother, Moishe Buxbaum, I would like to say something about his chesed activities during the war. In his labor camp, he had a bit more freedom since he was on the kitchen staff. He took upon himself single-handedly the mitzvah of Chevra Kedisha. Firstly, he recorded the names of all the people that died in the camp and the date of which they died. He also risked his life to give each Jew a proper burial. On one occasion, he was carrying a man without a shirt to be buried. He took off his shirt and put it on the dead man. It happened to be that a assessment soldier saw this. He screamed at him and ordered him to take back the shirt. Moishe refused to obey, saying, "This is how a Jew must be buried." The officer did not shoot Moishe. Instead, he told him to go into the barrack and get another shirt. After the war, Moishe kept his list. This helped many Jews after the war, firstly because of the records. There was no issue of agonis. All the wives of those that had died in his camp were sure that their husbands had died and they could remarry. Also, the families were able to say Kaddish on the yahrzeit of the passing of their relatives, as he had kept a record of the date of their passing. I was so happy to see my brother. I can't even describe my happiness. The Satmar Rebbe said that every survivor had a malach watching over them. I certainly felt that this was true in my case. The liberation itself was bittersweet. We were alone. We tried to heal our emotional wounds. It was difficult not to dwell on what we had lost, but we looked forward with hope, the hope of rebuilding. My husband and I were married in 1947 in a simple wedding held in 2 rooms of the former Nazi barracks in the DP camp in Bergen-Belsen in the English-occupied zone of Germany. Shortly afterwards, we left to Canada, where my husband had relatives. Many turned their backs on Yiddishkeit as a result of their bitter experiences. We cannot judge them. We felt that we were left alive and had that responsibility to rebuild families and communities in the Torah way, and with Hashem's help, we were able to do so. We were Zolty, for Hashem, to have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.
Yesher Koyach, Mrs. Bleeman. Yesher Koyach to the Rebbeinu Shalom that we have, Mrs. Bleeman. And as Mrs. Rappaport said, to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom that they're here. And I noticed something new. I didn't remember hearing about Mrs. Bleeman's brother.
Yeah, I thought I felt it here.
I know once she did.
Yeah,
I didn't remember that. I'm thankful.
Yeah.
So now that we've heard one version, we're going to hear from Mrs. Zolty, a slightly different aspect of it. Was Mrs. Zolty in the same?
No,
Well, not in the
not
same.
so far
Nearby.
away.
Nearby.
Nearby.
Okay. Mrs. Zolty will
Nearby.
tell us her experiences, and we have much to learn. Thank you, Mrs. Zolty. Tell your husband how lovely you are. We need him next year.
Mrs. Bleeman spoke to you about her experiences in the concentration camp during the war. I will continue with my personal story about the dreadful conditions of the survivors after the war, how I became a Bais Yaacov girl at the age of 20, and about the people who were instrumental in restoring my pride and my confidence, for which I will always be grateful. The war officially ended on May 8, 1945. I was reunited with my sister on May 9th, just one day after liberation. Our reunion was wonderful. However, the bliss of our survival was marred by a frightening feeling of foreboding and apprehension. We were free to leave the camp, but where would we go? Deep in our hearts we felt that our parents would not be waiting for us with their outstretched arm, with the promise that since the war was over, all our problems would come to an end. We were burdened by conflicting emotions, by feelings of hope, confusion, and despair, terrified to face the truth when we would eventually arrive in our hometown and be confronted by the shattering destruction with our own eyes. We undertook the trek back to our hometown because there was no other place for us to go. With hundreds of girls released from slavery, we trudged for days in order to reach our vague destination. We were traveling in groups, trying to hitch rides with passing farmers, or if we were lucky, we cut a short ride by train, but mostly we were traveling on foot, walking, plodding ahead on a journey to nowhere. After reaching the edge of our hometown, we were wondering which way we should turn. Out of sheer desperation, my sister and myself decided to enter the Jewish cemetery, which was located at the very edge of town. It was an eerie experience, since we had never at a cemetery before, but in our situation, it was probably the most secure place in the universe. Most of our friends, out of desperation and loneliness, aligned themselves with Jewish non-religious organizations. They were promised a better life and free transportation to Eretz Israel, which was Palestine at that time. It is very painful for me to recall today all those fine religious boys and girls, survivors of war, from the best homes, who forgot about their families, about their background, about the link between the past and the future, about bringing up new generations true to the Jewish religious tradition. This could have happened to me. I could have been one of those people. I was completely bereft of the ability to act or to make any rational decisions. Like an empty body, without a brain to think, without a heart to feel, and without a neshama to touch my conscience. I was without hope and without the strength to put myself above my gloomy situation to greater spiritual heights. Our brother was liberated in Bergen-Belsen, which was one of the worst concentration camps in Europe. After looking for any members of his family who might have survived the war, he found us in a remote town to where we moved in search of a better quality of life, which did not really materialize. He was shocked, realizing the dire situation in which he had found us. We parted as teenagers when he was torn away from our family by the gruesome Gestapo. After years of bitterness and darkness, his arrival was our first ray of sunshine, our first hope for a better future. Within a few days, we were on our way to Bergen-Belsen. Our brother assured us that we would be much happier, that life was more organized and help was arriving from many countries. He also promised us that as long as he will be alive, we will never be hungry again. We arrived in Bergen-Belsen, the former concentration camp, in November, about a half a year after the war. As our basic needs were being taken care of a bit, we started to look around in order to familiarize ourselves with our surroundings. Our living conditions were not too great yet, but I had a feeling that our situation was changing for the better and that somebody up there was looking after us. One day, walking in the street, we were surprised to meet Kayla Whitler, a girl from our hometown. We were very excited to meet somebody familiar who we remembered from our Bais Yaakov days back home. Actually, she was the first person who started a long chain of events which brought us to the doors of the makeshift Bais Yaakov school. Kayla informed us that a few former Bais Yaakov teachers, students of Mrs. Sarah Schneerer, survivors of war, were trying to gather the former Bais Yaakov girls wandering aimlessly in the streets of the camp and to arrange some kind of a semblance of a temporary school in order to remind them of their past and to bring them gradually back to their roots and to Yiddishkeit. Kayla urged us strongly to attend, but we were a bit reluctant. We felt too old at the age of 20 and 22 to attend school. Also, we knew that the situation was only temporary and would probably have to leave the place sometime in the nearest future, and with Hashem's help to start a new life, a normal life somewhere outside of the confines of the camp. However, this was our first experience, our first awakening to the fact that there still remained a spark of Yiddishkeit after this bitter war, and that things were starting to happen to us. A few days later, I experienced an incident which shook me up quite a bit. Just by chance, I noticed two young men davening with their tefillin on their heads and arms. I was overwhelmed. I had completely forgotten about the existence of tefillin. I actually did not see much of it at home, since the men always davened in a shul and we girls did not have the opportunity to observe them davening. But the sight of the two young men with their siddurim in hand and their tefillin was a sobering awakening for me. The two men settled eventually in Toronto and became prominent members of the community. One of them was Mr. Yosef Silver, Olav Hashalom. The other man was Mr. Avram Bleeman, the husband of Mrs. Bleeman, sitting right next to me. It took quite a while and a bit of prodding by a few influential people to make us consider to join the new Bais Yaacov movement. It was my sister who took the first step. As we were deliberating the pros and cons of her decision to attend a year at the fledgling Bais Yaacov school, she somehow implied that she was hesitant to show up in a strange place by herself. We decided that I would accompany her till the door, and she would hopefully meet some girls she would be able to befriend. It was about the middle of December, on a cold Shabbos afternoon, when we arrived at our destination. The door to the room where the class was located was wide open. I noticed about 20 girls and a teacher standing at her desk giving over some kind of a shiur. My sister entered the room, and I lingered a few seconds at the door. As it was prearranged, I was about to leave the premises when something very familiar, very perplexing, caught my attention. Whispers of the past, my parents, my home, my Bais Yaacov school. I thought that I was dreaming. After a while, I realized that it was a perek of the Tehillim the teacher was translating to the girls. It was the same perek I had learned a long time ago in my Bais Yaacov school in my hometown in Poland. I stopped to listen, and I started quietly to utter the words together with the teacher. I had no idea that I remembered it. I actually knew it by heart after so many years of nothingness and oblivion. I felt that I was transplanted into a different world, a world that I did not believe could still exist in those miserable times. Completely confused, I suddenly noticed the teacher coming down from the podium with her arms outstretched, moving towards me, pulling me slowly into the room, and sitting me firmly among the other girls. I was stunned. For so many years, I did not hear a word of Lashon HaKodesh. I've also forgotten how to speak Yiddish. We were frightened to speak this language in the concentration camps. And here, after such a long estrangement, in this faraway place, after I thought all had been lost, I suddenly felt a warmth in my heart, a reflection of my from home, of my youth, when life was still normal, when I was still so naive that I thought that words belonged to history books, not in real life in our modern civilized society. The teacher continues to shiur as if nothing important had just transpired. I glanced at the girls sitting around me, and I felt as if I would have been in my old Bais Yaacov school in my hometown. They were listening so seriously to the teacher's explanations, so hungry for knowledge, for the warmth she exuded, for the Jewish identity. We all thought that we had lost forever. And I was thinking to myself, could this be possible? After all those years, this long, horrible war, the loss of our parents, our siblings, our families, after all the catastrophes and disasters, could it be possible that I'm now sitting in a Bais Yaacov school on the site of a former concentration camp in Bergen-Belsen, listening to a shiur? We had lost our past, and it seemed to me that we'd also lost our future. And here the sky suddenly opened for us, to give us hope, to give us chizuk, a new future, a new life, a new beginning. I felt as if I woke up from a deep sleep, as if I had been hibernating all those long months after the war. I felt a surge of energy overtaking my body. My mind started to work, and I kept asking myself, what am I really doing outside of these walls? Why did I hesitate? This is me. This is where I belong. This is my past, and this is going to be my future. This is my Bais Yaacov school. This is my life, my real life, my spiritual home. This is where I will remain until I embark on the road that will hopefully lead me to a stable and normal future. we started to attend classes. The girls embraced us with love and friendship. It felt so good to be a student again. The teachers gave us a lot of attention. I felt a kind of warmth and devotion which I did not experience for many years. Only now, in retrospect, I realize that if it would not have been for the Kahashkacha practice, which was accompanied as step by step on our road to Yiddishkeit, and if it would not have been for my brother, Baruch Hashem survived the war and was liberated in Bergen-Belsen, circumstances might have turned out differently. It was my brother, with Hashem's help, rescued us from foreign forces and brought us back to a safer environment. And if it would not have been for that one split second when the teacher's Rekindling translation suddenly caught my attention as I was about to leave the premises, by now I would have probably been far removed from our past and our religion. The chain of hundreds of years of family tradition would have been severed forever. If it had not been for Kayla Whitler and all those individuals who befriended us and tried so hard to rouse us from our stupor and to rekindle our spirit and our enthusiasm, as well as our sense of pride in the Jewish tradition, you would surely have been blown away by the winds of war and gotten lost in the chaos that pervaded for a long time after the crucial and fateful aftermath of World War II. Mrs. Sarah Schenirer Oleashel had a vision. She would have been happy to know that the tiny seeds she planted so many years ago did not get lost in the confusion of war. Her students continued to reap the fruits of her work and to build new Bais Yaakov schools, new seminaries, and other educational institutions. Thanks to our teachers, our children, and our grandchildren, we have now a strong link connecting the golden chain from our glorious past to the hopefully magnificent future of our emerging new Jewish generations.
We are so grateful, Mrs. Zolty. Girls,
That I survived.
where would we be? Your beautiful Mishpacha, Toronto, the Meisters, where would we be? Girls, do you have any questions? Probably a million that you'll think of after they walk out the door. I remember asking a question, how old were you when you were taken? You said you were
15.
15 years old when she was taken on that horrible day when they knocked the door. And how old was Mrs. Zolty?
Well, I was 14 when the war broke out,
And
and I was 17.
Mom is younger than you.
Question here.
Yes. Loud.
So,
Now the teacher is asking questions.
Here, can I give you a seat?
That's all right, thank you.
we're living in a different world and with our different challenges. Different worlds and different challenges that we have. And we're struggling with very different things. What do we need to know? You brought with you from your parents' house the strength to be those who stood up again and who said, I'm going to do it.
I have to stand, but I have to listen to
You know, come up there. What can you tell us? What can you give us? What tools can you give to us that help you through, that help you get through it and
I guess that my tools are here in the pages.
It's like kind of like what you were saying. How did you get up in the morning the next day? Is that what you're trying to say? What gave you the strength?
What can you give us? What can you give us that we should be able to have to transmit to our children and the next
I
generation?
think
You
all
brought it
those
with
girls are so good.
They are.
They are so good. I look at them and I'm so proud of them. And the teachers. I'm so proud of the Bais Yaakov. I love Bais Yaakov girls.
I think you have such wonderful education now that keeps you very strong and good.
We should appreciate it.
We should appreciate
Like a lot of things we
Oh.
have and take for granted.
Our Bais Yaakov was not like this Bais Yaakov because we had to go to a Polish school. and we had only like 1.5 hours in Bais Yaacov every day.
Like
1.5 hours. So after right. So how much could we already learn? But we did. Not only we did, but I remember many things by heart that we learned, like all this, you know, the
Malachim.
First is the Osnia Eifenschankheit wurde Gidon, I've made a kind of
The Shoftim.
And all the Melochim, the Yehuda, the Israel and the Yehuda, I know all those things. I remember all those things from that Bais Yaacov.
Because you can't
forced to memorize it, or everyone just really wanted to, and it was different? Were you forced to memorize it? Or everyone had such
well, actually, we had to memorize it. Yes, we had to memorize it.
We're sitting in school, right? For me, when I was, and these girls, we sit in school not for an hour and a half a day, or for 10 hours a day.
Right.
Somehow we're missing the passion. Why? And how do we find that passion? Because that's what we need. We have the education and we have the knowledge, but where does the passion go?
I think all those girls have passion.
I just want to add, Mrs. Zolty saying how she loves Bais Yaacov. We have 2 diplomas, if you ever noticed, hanging there. One's in Lashon HaKodesh, one's in Polish. When we opened the seminary, Mrs. Zolty said, I want the Toronto Seminary, Bais Yaacov Teachers Training Seminary, to have these. They are the diplomas signed by Sarah Schneer and others, not from the seminary in Krakow, but a different town, of a cousin and teacher of Mrs. Zolty's, whose name was, what was her maiden name? Cisner was her married name. Wiener, who later became...
Rachel Wiener.
Rachel Wiener, who later became Rebbetzin Cisner, who taught in Bais Yaacov of Borough Park, who afterwards, after we had the diplomas and after the certificates, her granddaughter became our daughter-in-law. That's just a little plus there.
Now we got a little mishpacha.
Yeah, but the privilege of knowing that we are part of that legacy that is Bais Yaacov. Girls, you are the link to the glorious past, difficult, glorious past, and to the future. And cherish that. Cherish that. And we could really go on and on, but our next speaker is here, and I think that girls need just a 3-minute break or something, and we are so grateful that these dear women took the time, and that their daughters who've heard this story come again and again and again. And we wish Mr. Bleeman, or Fri Jul, last year Mr. Bleeman came and spoke to us about his experience, which was a whole nother walk in the park. And Hashem, it's nice to hear that again. This year we weren't so good. We are so grateful. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.